All right, Adam Hogue. Out of nowhere, the Chicago Fire have found a privately financed home in the 78th, the beautiful Chicago neighborhood that nobody wanted to go into. We'll get to that in a second or in a couple of minutes. But first, let's focus on the Bears' moves and or non-moves, as there was lots of stuff going on in Springfield, but we don't have any real progress, or maybe we do. I want to hear your take on what's going on with the Bears in Arlington Heights that seemed to get closer but didn't get across the finish line.
Yeah, as I pointed out a couple weeks ago, May 31st was a big date for the Bears. Not a date that, derails the whole thing, but a date they really needed to get this thing rolling in 2025. That was the end of the legislative session in Springfield on Saturday, and things just did not really fall the Bears' way. My understanding is they actually had a lot of support for what they needed, which was eventually a legislative bill coming, to a vote, which would allow private developers to negotiate with local taxing districts to get tax certainty on bigger projects. And that would be a statewide bill, not just specific to the Bears, but it certainly would help the Bears with their negotiations with the Arlington Heights taxing districts and to get that tax certainty that they're looking for. And it never even got to the bill stage, from what I understand. Like, it was just it seemed like support was there, but not surprisingly, Springfield was a little bit of a mess on Saturday as they were trying to focus on the budget mostly, and then they just ran out of time, which happens. So the Bears didn't get what they needed out of all that. Does not mean that they can't still get this bill to the finish line by the end of 2025, because there is another session in the fall, but that would severely hamper the timeline for actually getting shovels in the ground in 2025 before winter comes, and just delaying this more and more. And now I wonder, it wouldn't shock me, Carm, if we see more flirtation with other options. As I've said all along, I don't necessarily think other options are that realistic. But, do they have to start flirting outside Cook County? That might be something that they have to do just to sort of gain more leverage. The other option would be to go the other direction, just be like, all right, well, we do have this memorandum of understanding. We'll figure all that out later. Let's just start get this project down the road. The problem with that is then you start to lose the leverage you need in those negotiations. And as we saw on Saturday, sometimes this stuff just doesn't get done in the state of Illinois. So I think that would be extremely risky.
Well, it just feels like, because, we talked about this earlier in the week, Cam Buckner, who's representing the district where Soldier Field is, lives for now at least, is saying, like, you got to go through Chicago. So it almost feels like, and I'm sure we're trying to get Cam on the show at some point here, but it almost feels like the Bears, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but they're going to have to almost pay Chicago off to leave Chicago. Is that right?
Well, the reality is they need the vote. They need the Democratic votes in the city to even get what they need to go to Arlington Heights. Now, there's a couple things that would help that. I mean, one is the fact that Arlington Heights is still in Cook County. So there's still a benefit to the county that Chicago is in with this new stadium, the events that would come with it, Super Bowl, Final Four, all those things like that. So that's where I start to say, well, flirting outside Cook County, that's where we start to play that leverage politics game again. And that's why that wouldn't shock me. But yeah, they do need those votes. And so you ask the question, why would those Democratic voters in the city essentially vote for the Bears to leave the lakefront? Well, that's where and I don't really know what that would be. Are we talking some sort of revenue sharing with the city? Are we talking about paying off Soldier Field, which that whole nightmare still exists? All of those things I think are options in order to secure those votes. I don't get the sense that that's a huge roadblock at this point in time, but because it felt like this all could have gone down Saturday if they just had the time to do it, and it just never really got to the finish line.
So your bet would be that it gets done in the fall. Are you making that? Would you make that bet right now?
I would still make that bet. I still think Arlington Heights, as I've said all along, is the most likely and realistic option and end game for all of this. However, and this is, I think, where we can sort of transition the conversation to what went down this morning with the Chicago fire, you know, until this is a done deal, you never know, right? And just like a few years ago, we thought, oh, they bought the land, this thing's heading to Arlington Heights. And then all of a sudden, Kevin Warren came in out of nowhere and was like, here's this press conference we're going to have the day before the draft. And we're talking the city, and there's like a celebration. And everyone goes like, well, what? So we have seen this be a roller coaster from start to finish. And just opening the door for another 3-4 months here opens that door for more theatrics, more random things to go down. And this morning, to see the fire come out of nowhere and be the Chicago fire, say that, hey, we're building on the 78 at Roosevelt Road in the river, when we didn't know if that was going to be Chicago White Sox land, Chicago Fire land, both of them. And the fire just like, we got the money, a privately funded stadium. We're doing it. This thing's going to, now they still need approval from the city too, but I don't know why they would get in the way of this happening to develop that area at the 78.
Right. So Joe Mansueto owns the fire, who made his billions launching Morningstar, which is an outstanding investment tool that people have made a lot of dough on, and Sterling Joe's made a lot of dough on. And congratulations to him. This guy's a self-made billionaire who loves soccer and now apparently loves the 78 because he's spending $650 million to build a soccer stadium there, which, by the way, if people aren't paying close attention to MLS, they play 34 games a year. That's 17 home games. 17 minus 81, the amount of a baseball season, that's 64 less games. So it's not as big of a win for the city as it could have been if the White Sox had been there. But this puts the White Sox in a really horrible place. And it also shows the Bears that, hey, here's a super rich guy who's willing to spend a ton of dough. I mean, the Bears aren't asking for any stadium financing, though. They're just asking for infrastructure help. So there's a lot of moving parts here. But this is a big domino that just dropped it. And you're a diehard Sox guy, Hogue, as much as you've distance yourself from them last couple of years. This is not a good day for the White Sox in any way, shape, or form. I wouldn't think.
Yeah, I mean, I'll first start with like how this is intertwined. I mean, they're all intertwined together. That's why we're addressing it here, even still on a Bears podcast. That one note you put in there is really important to say, because it's not like the Bears are privately financing the stadium. They have said that all along, and that would be the case on the lakefront too. It's just it's a bigger project. They need more public funding than what the fire need to build a 22,000 seat soccer stadium. We've seen these stadiums pop up in a number of different places. That they did this in Minnesota too. And the reason I always bring up Minnesota is because it's very relevant to Kevin Warren and how they ended up. Their teams were all in needs of stadiums, and they ended up one in Minneapolis baseball stadium. It's great for the Twins. They ended up building the Viking stadium on the existing Metrodome plot, and in the middle of that, halfway between Minneapolis and St. Paul, like pretty much right in the middle, you could see it when you're driving down 94 between the two cities, is a really nice soccer stadium, very similar to the one that the Fire are now going to build in the 78. So all of these things tend to be politically intertwined. The money involved tends to be intertwined. I don't really think what happened this morning will have any impact on what happens with the Bears stadium. It's just separate. It's way more complicated. It's grander scale. They need more and all that. But it is super interesting that, like, just a couple days after the Bears couldn't get done what they needed in Springfield, the Fire just like swooping in here like, oh yeah, we exist here too, and we're just going to go ahead and do this. And in all the time that we've been finagling over Arlington Heights and that town hall meeting that happened 3 years ago, and they still haven't figured out what they're doing, Northwestern and the Chicago Fire are just like, we're going to go ahead and do this and build these stadiums. Now, again, smaller scale, of course, but it's just super interesting, because as they're starting me this conversation, Carmen, I think it's fair to have, and maybe that's how we end this podcast. It's just like, does Kevin Warren deserve more scrutiny for how long this is taking? Because I'm starting to see that more and more on social media, that he's not getting the job done. And meanwhile, you also brought up the White Sox. Who the hell knows how this affects them? Does it Do they need to go find different land? Can they squeeze themselves on the same plot of land as the Fire? Or are they going to go nuclear and leave for Nashville?
I would like to remind everybody that when the White Sox had a good baseball team, plenty of people went out in the South Side. They haven't built around it. There's nothing wrong with that place. They don't need a new stadium. It's ridiculous. One other thing as we get out of here. Look, it's not just the Fire. It's not just Northwestern. The United Center was built by the Bulls and the Blackhawks. The city didn't help with that. They paid for it. The Cubs renovated Wrigley Field. That was private money. That's, they got nothing. Ricketts went out and just did it, and then he bought up the whole neighborhood too. So these things have happened in Chicago. Now the Bears thing is a lot more complex, but I just want to remind people: Cubs did it themselves. Northwestern, the Fire, the Bulls, the Blackhawks. I mean, that's a long list right there. So to your point about Kevin, get it done. That's what he's brought in here to do. I think he will, but it just I want to underline it's been done before all over the place here.
Yeah, again though, this is way bigger than the United Center and all that. And here's the thing I'll say on Kevin Warren. Like I do think some mistakes have been made here. I also understood why there was a Hail Mary thrown at the city. It cost them a lot of time and a lot of money the longer they delayed this whole thing. But I get why they did. They had to do it for two reasons. One, if they could, we're all in agreement that if they could figure out a solution in the city, that would be the best. It's just not very realistic. And then second, they needed that for leverage for Arlington Heights too. Let's not forget that. And it worked. So it's easy to be like, oh, Kevin Warren wasted all this time and money by flirting with the city again. Now, I thought it was a little too extravagant. I thought it was a little too much, but if the end game is this thing gets done and they build an amazing stadium, it's a big if. But if that all ends up happening, whether that's 3, 4, 5, 10 years down the road, hopefully not that long, then Kevin Warren did ultimately do what he was brought here to do.
And ultimately, for the record, I would make that bet that it does get done, and we'll just one day we'll celebrate the winding road that it took to get there. Let's go with that. All right. Hey, you've been watching a Chicago Bears, CHGO Bears mini pod stadium news. Congratulations to the Fire as the Bears, at some point, the Bear is going to find his home. It's probably going to be over here, but it might be over there. Right now, he's just sitting in the middle. Hogue, we'll see you on the show today, or if you're watching this not on a show day, we'll see you tomorrow. How's that? Good to see you, buddy.